it's time to sit back and relax with your favorite drink. And listen. The government is hiding a new disease. People are turning. I still see those things in my sleep. Even though it's been many months since I last saw them, you just can't stop yourself from visualizing one standing right above your bed when you close your eyes. But it gets so much worse when these things tear away friends and family from their bodies, instead of having to put a stranger out of their misery. Alright, that was probably too much info to take in, so let's start from the beginning. My name's Brad. I'm a police sergeant. I won't go into specifics about my personal life too much because that's not what all of this is about. No, I'm here to talk to you about the disease that wiped out, or, well, more like changed, everyone in my hometown. It was a late, chilly August evening. Aside from myself, there was Carter, Jack, and Logan. Now, some quick background info. Me and Carter had joined the police force as friends. However, we'd met Jack and Logan at the task force itself. Now that our vacation was coming to an end, we decided to meet up at a campsite to experience the privilege of breathing the crisp nature air we rarely had time to cherish. We were all sitting on logs, covered in a thick blanket of warmth emanating from the bright campfire raging in front of us. After a while of talking about our lives and upcoming events, we sat in silence, save for the branches that Jack was picking at in the fire, with his shotgun leaning on a small rock behind him. Since we work as law enforcers, we were given permission to own a firearm license and use it when we thought necessary. Wild animals or drunks occasionally slip by our woods at night, so the double barrel was the only real thing ensuring our safety. It might sound a bit strange, but we live in a part of town that doesn't really mind all that. As I look back to the woods, recent memories begin to creep into the front of my mind as I fall into deep thought. I knew that it would be best if I just embraced them and got it over with, but I still wasn't ready to let them go, let alone face them. I tried to clear my mind by attempting to rekindle the conversation as I gaze up to the stars beginning to light the reddish sky. Nice night today, eh? I gesture upwards with my eyes as everybody else glances up to the darkening sky. Yeah, replied Logan. Haven't seen that many stars in a while, added Jack. After that, silence seemed to regain its composure, and I slowly sank back, deep into my mind. Though I never showed anything on the outside, I would occasionally feel locked up thoughts desperately trying to escape my lips. But I didn't want to worry anyone, so for now it was easy enough to brush it off as the aftermath of a dismal incident. It'll pass, I often told myself. As I looked up from the grass, I locked eyes with Carter sitting right across my log. Through all the years together, Carter had learned to read me, even when I put on my most expressionless face. You okay, Brad? He asks. Yeah, I'm fine, I quickly respond as I break eye contact and look away. After a few more seconds of studying me, he sighs. Cut the bull. What's bothering you? He asks, clearly not caring about the fact he'd just caught everyone else's attention. I'm fine. Just thinking about that book I'm writing, I retort. Your crime novel? Come on. You just don't pull that out of nowhere, continues Carter. And besides, you never liked dealing with outlaws. Why remember all that? He says. I stop. Just wanting to tell others that shit they're getting themselves into if they decide to sign up. Preparing them, I unenthusiastically blurt out. And with that, Carter fell quiet, weighing his options on what to say next. Tired of the whole ordeal, I blatantly kick some nearby dirt as I looked at the sun beginning to touch the horizon. It's your GF, isn't it? I jolt up to see that Logan has pipped into the conversation. How do you... you're in the blues, man. We all go through it. Just pick yourself up and... There's plenty more fish in the sea, he announces as he lets out a quick chuckle. Yeah, me and... I start. I'm about to have my emotions all leave my mouth at once, when I hear a big piece of wood fall, and I look at the dying fire. I shouldn't tell them. Not yet. We need to spark up the fire again. I'll go get us some firewood. I hastily grab the bag we use for this job and hurriedly leave my groupmates, most of whom have gone back to doing their own thing. But as Carter puts the last of the remaining twigs into the fire, he looks at me with suspicion until I'm completely out of his sight. As I walk through the bushes into a more wooded area, I begin to feel irked. Who are they to judge what I do with my life? Carter always questioning everything. I spot a half-snapped tree surrounded by thick branches. Jackpot. The frustration on my face quickly dissipates as I collect the cool but dry timber. That'll last us the entire night, if not more. With a little light to guide me, I collect as much wood as the bag would hold, before a repulsive stench hits my nose. Out of pure disgust, I cough a couple of times before putting my hand up to my nose. I know it sounds cliché, but at that moment, I felt expired blood and the insides of a frog intensified by 200% all around me. I was about to leave when I heard a distorted growling noise. I looked deeper into the woods and only saw darkness as the sun's rays no longer reached this part of the forest. After a few more seconds of not moving an inch, I heard slow, seemingly distant footsteps. It was barely noticeable, but eventually the smell got stronger, and the growl became more aggressive as the footsteps got louder and louder. It was only when my eyes started to water from the lack of blinking, mixed with the rotten stench and the horrific sound mere yards away from me, that I bolted back in the direction of the camp. As I got closer to my destination, I began to hear faint noises of Jack's usual bragging about a girl in a bar and laughs coming from Logan and Carter. However, my sudden burst of hope quickly diminished, as I felt more isolated by the second, as the footsteps behind me had now clearly turned into a run. Eventually, I saw the tiny fire barely illuminating 3 figures past the familiar bushes. I charged through the sharp tree branches hanging in front of me, scraping my face, not daring to look back. Finally, I crashed through the bushes and felt my shoulder impact the rough ground below me. Once my breaths had filled my lungs with an adequate amount of oxygen, I looked up to see that my friends were all gaping at me with a surprised and puzzled look. They all held a bottle of Heineken, which explained why their laughs had suddenly ceased when I plopped down right in front of them. I no longer heard the footsteps, but the relief of that did not compare to the terrified, dreaded feeling that screamed at me. I glared at the double-barrel shotgun, ready to jump on it when Carter put a hand on my shoulder. He was the only person that looked relaxed in our group. But when I looked into his eyes, I only saw curiosity mixed in with concern. "Let's get you up, bud," he says as he offers his hand. I clasp it and get up onto my legs. "All right, what's wrong?" My explanation seemed to come out in a jumble of words, according to Carter's face. But out of all of it, at least he understood that something was wrong and we were in danger. Though hesitant, everyone caved in after a while of convincing. We'd gone hunting yesterday, so our remaining ammo for the shotgun was low anyway. On the way back to the cabin, I managed to repeat everything I said in a more calm demeanor, but in the end, everyone was either looking at me like I'd just uncovered a terrible truth, or that I needed serious medical attention. I've been told that lying isn't my strong suit, though, which is probably the reason why they didn't give me up to a mental hospital right then and there. "So you didn't actually see anyone?" Jack asked, curiously. I nodded as he scratched his stubble beard. "It's your imagination. You've just been tense the past few weeks. It's just an instinct overreaction. Get some sleep, and you'll wake up fresh as a daisy." When we got back to the cabin, we all felt drowsy, dumping our clothes in the living room and heading off to our own small rooms to hit the hay. I vaguely remember wishing everyone a good night with my yawns. I remember hitting my pillow out of exhaustion, and I remember closing my eyes, thinking everything would be okay tomorrow. My optimism wouldn't last. I woke up in a sweat, hearing loud voices downstairs. I flung on a t-shirt and some jeans before running out of my door and feverishly stumbling down the stairs. As I was going down, I heard, "What the hell is that?" and "Get the shotgun." I wasn't surprised to find everyone was already down there aside from Jack, arguing about what to do next. "Hey, what's going on?" I shout. Logan turns to me wide-eyed and explains the situation. "I woke up in the middle of the night to get some water from the kitchen, so I come down here, look out of the window, and I see that." He points to someone standing right outside the backyard window, and I feel a chill run down my spine. As the commotion around me progresses, I continue peering at the person, or at least someone that looks like a person, on the other side of the window. He had pale skin and brown hair that was beginning to fall off, with a black liquid trickling down his mouth. In a sick way, it reminded me of saliva oozing out of a baby's mouth. And then there were the eyes, the white, bloodshot eyes. But that's not what chilled me to the bone. What truly stopped this thing from being called a human were the exotically malicious growls it was making. The same growls I'd heard in the woods, except now they were much, much closer. I looked back to my companions to see Jack had joined us and had his hand on the backyard door. "I'm going to put a hole in that son of a bitch. Who the hell does he think he is barging in the middle of the night, waking everyone up, not even giving a damn?" he furiously shouts. "Jack, look, you don't know what this thing is. Just calm down, let's all figure this out," I shouted back. But the door is already open, and it's inside. I hear a sharp explosion, and then a scream before it's on Jack. God, it all seemed to happen so fast. Logan was frozen in place. Carter was trying to pull the thing off, while Jack was desperately screaming for us to get it off him. I spot the double barrel lying beside the struggle, and know I only have one shot. I promptly grab the shotgun, click off the safety, pull back the forend, concentrate, and aim just as Carter shoves the thing to the wall. My finger pulls back the trigger, and the double barrel recoils just as it's getting up. The cartridge collides with its shoulder, and a squirt of blood leaves its upper chest as it swiftly falls backward and collapses on the wooden tiles. Logan and Carter run to help Jack while I take off the 2 remaining shells from the shotgun sling and reload after inserting them into the loading port. I'm not risking an empty gun if more of those things stop by. I run over to check on Jack, who's squirming in pain. "Are you all right?" I worriedly ask him. "Yeah, just a flesh wound. That little fucker actually bit me right here." He wheezes for air as he points to his neck, where the thing's teeth marks revealed to have made a wide gash filled with blood and the black liquid that had begun to flood his clothes. God, what was the problem with that? Logan's voice is cut off by those damn growls. I slowly turn around to see the impossible. It had gotten back up. Its shoulder was limp, and the force of my shot had caused its skin and bone to be destroyed, which instead now showed a weak shower of blood dribbling down its ribs. And I swear I thought I saw a part of its lungs as well, and it was still standing. It took me a few moments to notice all of this, and when I did, I saw the thing was now advancing forward, glaring into my soul with such hatred that I felt it would search every fiery corner in hell until it found and killed me. I stumbled with my shotgun, while the others urgently shouted at me to shoot it. By the time it's pointed at the thing, it's only a few feet away. In a mix of fear and confusion, I fire my last 2 shells at its head and torso, and feel the double barrel's rear smash against my chest as a bright yellow light flashes from its muzzle. Over the sound of my ears ringing, I hear a thud and look up to see the thing lying on the ground, hopefully for good this time. I drop the shotgun and run to check the corpse, when I noticed Jack's wheezes had stopped. It had now turned into slow, forced breaths. My pace quickens to a jog as I turn to Jack's direction, and shock overtakes me when I see his skin had become pale like the thing's, and he was now periodically coughing up blood. "Carter, get him an ambulance. Me and Logan will..." I don't get to finish my sentence as Jack begins coughing again, but this time instead of blood, he hacks up a few drops of a black substance that land on my shirt. Usually, I'd act very differently if this happened, but at that moment, the fear for my friend greatly overpowered my spark of disgust. All my attention is on Jack as he begins to talk with a raspy voice. "It's too late. It's taking over. I can't control it anymore." And with that, his muscles relax and he stops breathing. Carter pulls his head back towards his neck to check his pulse, and then soundlessly gets back up with his head pointed downwards. Carter pulls his head towards his neck to check his pulse, and then soundlessly gets back up with his head pointed downwards. Jack was dead. We all stand in silence for a few moments before Logan speaks up. "It had to be that thing, right? The black goo he gave him. Was it poisonous or something?" Then I ask the question I still regret to this day. What did he mean by it was taking over him? Carter, still looking at the floor, hesitantly answers. Maybe the substance infected his blood, which caused the primary organs to shut down. Maybe he thought he was losing control of them while they actually just stopped operating. He says, more to himself than to us. So, death was taking over him? Logan asks. "I don't know," Carter bleakly says as he pushes his hand into his face. Then, the whole situation really sinks in. Jack was gone. We hadn't saved him in time. If I'd warned him earlier and gone out and killed that disgrace of a human being, then Jack would have survived. It's all my fault. I was the one with the gun. We're all choking back tears now. It's been a while since I had someone close pass away. It's so depressing to re-enter that phase where you remember all those great times you were with them, and then slowly be swallowed up by the painful realization that you'd never experience any of that ever again. But there was something else that bothered me. Jack was around my height, but he was no small guy, 6'2" in fact. To see him slip away in a matter of minutes, seconds after a bite, was in some ways more shocking than sad. I look at the group and see Logan pacing around the room. "What are we going to tell the guys at the station, his family? They're all going to think we did it," he inquires. And, in all honesty, Logan is a pretty chill guy, and to see him this nervous didn't help our situation. Carter opens his mouth to say something when I hear a disturbing, moaning sound. We instantly turn our backs to confront the noise, and then we see where it's coming from. No, he's not that thing. No, he's not that humanoid. Jack, or the creature that had stripped his soul from his body, was now standing with its back towards us, observing the surroundings in front of it. Somehow Carter and I knew it wasn't our Jack, but Logan thought differently. "It's a miracle. He's alive," he shouts in joy as he runs toward the humanoid for a hug, hands outstretched. We grab Logan and tell him it's not the real Jack, but he retorts by saying it is, and he's alive. With surprising force, he violently pushes us off and runs towards the dead Jack. Just as he's about to reach the thing, it turns around and we see white eyes where its pupils once were. Only red veins remain like rivers on a map. His moans have gotten more aggressive now, similar to growls, and when he opened his mouth, the same black goo was visible, bubbling deep in his throat. Logan began to back off, but the creature snaps its head back and lunges right at him. It crashes into his shoulder and knocks him to the ground, all the while Logan was switching between swearing the most he ever had in his life and pushing the creature's chin from his shoulder. We ran to help him, but Just as we were almost there, the thing finally managed to get its teeth on his skin and sank them deep into his chest. "I'm bit. You can't save me. Get out of here. Get help," he desperately implored. We both stared at the scene before us, deciding what to do next before looking at each other and dashing to the decrepit BMW in the front yard. On the run back, I almost tripped when my gaze lingered too long on the slimy intestines spilled out on the dead thing's stomach that now had its shattered skull turned into a fountain of red. The combination of that and the echoes of Logan's screams slicing the air didn't help my coordination. Once I was finally outside, I spotted Carter running towards the car, who I followed, having the cool fresh air brush against my quiff hair ever so slightly. I jumped into the front passenger seat of our vehicle and slammed the door shut, just as Carter flared up the engine and turned on the headlights. We sped off into the night, attempting to comprehend everything that had just happened. Even though new questions popped up every minute, there were a few that stuck out. How did Jack die from a bite? How did he get back up? Will Logan share the same fate? As my sea of questions rose, I began to feel a headache coming along as well as a tingling fatigue. Just as I was about to pass out, Carter startled me awake. "So, where exactly are we going?" he says in an obnoxious manner as he tapped his fingers on the wheel. "Got no idea," I plainly responded. I happened to glance downwards as I said this, and I saw the same few drops of black goo Jack had spit on me right after he was bitten. "Hey, Carter, I've still got that black shit on me, by the way," I nervously tell him. He glances at my t-shirt and then back at the road before he responds. "Just don't touch it. You can change it when we arrive at the house." "Problem is, it's far away," I grumbled in annoyance. When I really thought about it, I realized all our houses were far away. In fact, the only standing structure I knew around this area was the bingo. "Carter, we're going to the station. Out here, it's only like a 5-10 minute drive." "You sure, Brad?" he questions. "You think the chief's still awake by now? Besides, he'll probably think we're insane." Look, the chief's never doubted me. And who knows how bad this thing is if it's infectious. He must have gotten reports on this, and if not, well, we'll tell him we're just tired and walk out the doors and figure everything out in the morning. Plus, I don't know how long I can be in safety with this shirt on. Carter gives me a suspicious, almost unsatisfied look before his face relaxes. "Well, then let's go," he says nonchalantly. And with that, we make a left turn to drive out of the woods and to the station. When we arrived, there weren't many lights rebelling against the early morning. We got out of our BMW and locked the doors. As we got closer to the foggy glass doors, we heard chattering from inside. We reached the doors and pulled them open. Inside was the chief standing with his thick black moustache and the few strings of hair that remained plastered on his head. Beside his hand, holding his daily cup of joe, stood one of my co-workers that looked to be on duty. His surprise quickly turns into a heart-warming smile. "Brad, Carter, what are you doing here? Shouldn't you be resting under some warm covers while you have the time?" He gives out a jolly laugh as he walks over to us and gives us 2 nice pats on the back. "What can I do for you?" he asks. "Sorry for barging in like this, Chief Noah. We have something important we need to tell you. Maybe you can fill us in on this." We explain a bit of what had happened, leaving out the most unbelievable parts. When we finish, his face shows nothing but curiosity. However, his eyes are undoubtedly filled with panic. A couple of seconds pass in silence before he speaks again. "All right, boys. I'll make sure this is dealt with," he states. "But you two need some rest. With the bags under your eyes, you're in no condition to drive." The drowsy feeling I had before hits me with severe force, and I realize I am in bad shape to drive. I spare a glance at Carter and saw that he was no different than me, maybe worse. "So, here's what we'll do," the chief continues. "We're going to get you to a place to sleep for the night." He peers at my BMW through the window. "When you wake up fresh in the morning, you'll drive safely back home," he finishes. I muster up a weak smile at the chief as he sends someone over to escort us to our rooms. "Hey, you have something on your shirt there," our escort notifies me as we reach my room. "Oh, yeah, got some dirt on it. Isn't coming off. Do you have a shirt I can borrow here?" I lie. "Oh, well, yeah, sure. Should I throw you your current shirt in the wash?" Yeah, thanks a lot." I cut him off, not wanting him to ask any more questions. He leaves and comes back a minute later with a fresh shirt from the dryer. I snatch it, walk into my room and change my shirt. Once that's done, I come out, thank him again, and walk into my room for the night. After that, I can't remember what I did, but the memory of Chief whispering a code blue into his radio accompanied by a command to send 2 units over to our cabin's location just before he was out of earshot lingered in my mind long after I fell into a deep sleep. When I awoke from my slumber, the sun's rays were already flashing through the top of my window. I look at the clock. It shows 12:27 p.m. Well, usually I would jump up if I woke up at this time, but again, recalling previous events, I didn't care what time I woke up for now. I looked down at my shirt to be sure that the black spot is no longer there, when I realized that I hadn't changed my clothes last night. After a few quick stretches, I open my door and walk to the station's living room, where I see Carter and a few other officers lounging on the chairs and sofa with their cups of coffee. Not in the mood for a cup, I walk down to Carter and grab a donut on the way. "So, where's the big guy?" I ask Carter. "Well, my guess is that he's out cold. Must have been up all night," Carter answers, taking a sip of his coffee. I take a bite of my donut as I take a seat next to Carter. I'm about to put my head down on the sofa when our escort from last night comes up to us. "Good morning. You guys sleep well?" he asks. "Yeah, we had a good rest," I respond. "So we finished washing your shirt and most of it's come off, but there's still a little bit left right here." He points to a dark spot that remains on my clean white shirt. God damn it. Alright. Thanks again," I reply, carefully taking the shirt from his hands without touching the black spot. Our escort smiles and wishes us a wonderful day before he leaves. I'm kind of getting tired of having a shirt be the one of my main problems, I tell Carter. "Tough luck," he guesses. "Come on. I'm starting to get a bit homesick after all of this." I chomp down the last bits of my donut while Carter gulps down the remainder of his drink. After we're done, we get up and walk outside. I throw my dirty shirt in the nearest trash can, glad to get rid of it and embrace the warm, soothing air. I get into the BMW and slowly lean on the slightly burning driver's seat. The air inside my car was humid, which hinted the sun was already starting to bake it. I hastily turn on the air conditioner before the insides of my car become a blazing barnyard. I turn the key for the engine and press on the gas while informing Carter that I was going to drop him off at his house first. We didn't talk much on the drive back. While that might seem a bit odd for us since we're usually pretty energetic when it comes to conversations, what's even more strange is that the frequent traffic we often bump into was nowhere in sight. Sure, there were cars that occasionally followed or zoomed by us, but not enough to cause a real big traffic jam. Even more, there seemed to be an increased amount of police everywhere as well. We didn't pay too much mind to this, however, and we eventually reached Carter's house, where he jumped off and promised to give me a call later on. As soon as he entered his house, I turned back around into the direction of the cabin. To this day, I still think that I was better off not going, but at the time I felt I needed to know the truth. I knew Carter would disagree, which is why I was going alone. I needed to know what really happened to Jack and Logan. The ride was shorter than I expected, though that made sense since we usually had a numerous number of stalls on the way there. But now, there was nothing that would distract me. I determinedly made my way to the old house. When I arrived, it was well past brunch. I parked my car a good distance from the lodge, not wanting to attract attention. And as I expected, when the entire part of the front of the house was visible, I noticed a cop car standing right in front of the cabin, where I could barely make out a figure through the half-cracked open window. I quickly hid behind some trees. If any of my co-workers recognized me, there would surely be questions on why I was here during my vacation right after I'd reported an attack here just a day ago. I waited for a few minutes, hoping for some miracle that would make whoever was here leave and not getting anything. I was just about to head back when I heard a loud voice coming from inside the car. I looked back and saw the person inside now held a small black object. His radio. He looked distraught, and a few seconds later he put down the radio and flared his cruiser while simultaneously turning on his sirens and driving right past my hiding spot as I ducked beneath some bushes. When the coast was clear and I couldn't hear the sound of his screeching tires anymore, I made a run for the cabin. I got to the door and tried to open it, but it was locked or barricaded from the inside. Damn, should have come earlier. Then I remembered the backyard. The wooden fence isn't that tall, I could probably climb over it. Before doing so, I listened for any noise. It didn't seem like there was any, and they wouldn't have had time to set up cameras in there. At this point, I was too dogged to stop myself, so I brazenly grabbed the top of the fence and pulled myself over. I landed on the grass and turned the corner to the grilling area where the back door was, and I was taken aback. I knew the backyard would be a bit messy from our struggle, but the new scene was unsettling. More furniture was tossed over, and it now looked like somebody had spilled a full bucket of black goo instead of the few drops we saw last night. The same repulsive smell I smelt in the woods and on my shirt had also returned. The police had had quite a time. Yet, something told me that I needed to continue onwards and find out what had happened last night. Perhaps an instinct. I followed the scent as it got stronger. The only thing that I could do to stop myself from vomiting was breathing through my mouth, but even then I still felt its ominous presence. And then, at the very edge of the backyard, I saw a white bag lying on the orange leaves with what looked to be a shovel situated on the fence. As I got closer, I realized that what I was looking at was a body bag. On closer examination, I noticed a small part of the bag on the top was unfolded. At the angle I was at, I couldn't see inside it, but a couple of steps forward, and I would. After taking a deep breath, I leaned my head sideways and immediately saw that the corpse inside was filled with bullet holes and the black glue, like in all the other infected. And then I recognized the person as the crippled, rotting body of Logan. I've had enough of this, I thought, as I sprinted in the direction of the BMW. I jumped over the fence and stopped in my tracks. In front of me stood a policeman with a fresh cut, who I assumed was trying to grow a beard. I braced for the incoming questions, but then realized that the man standing in front of me was Geralt. He and I weren't really close, but since we both worked at the station with the others, I could say we were acquaintances. "Brad?" he asked as he took off his glasses to inspect me. "Aren't you still on a break? Why are you here?" "It's a long story. Did you get assigned here?" "Yeah, just right now they needed someone to fill in this case. The others..." He stops, realizing he's said too much. "Well, they had other matters to deal with. Anyways, why are you here again?" He presses. I don't really know what to say. I can't think of a good lie, but I can't think of a good way to put the truth either. Then I remember the chief's reaction. He was definitely hiding something back there. And if he knows something, then maybe he told the others on duty like Geralt. decided to give it a shot and confess everything to him pretty quickly. I don't know. Look, yesterday me, Carter, Jack and Logan were camping. Then we were back inside and in the middle of the night, this thing with black goo bit Jack and we took it down, but then Jack started spitting the black goo and it bit Logan. You already saw them? He asks. Saw who? Biters, he balks for a few seconds. Some kind of disease going around. I'll tell you everything when you're back on the job. Turns towel back to his car, but I stop him. Look, I just lost 2 people that I've known for years last night. Can you just tell me what the hell is going on here? He sighs and looks me in the eye. I'm not allowed to say anything to anyone, but look, these biters are multiplying. Lock your doors and try not to go outside too much. That's all I can offer. Now, enjoy the rest of your vacation. I take in all of this relatively slowly, but I still manage to thank him and drive back home. After that, it was difficult to be at ease whenever I remembered what Geralt had told me, which is why I slept a lot. It was a good distraction, but in the back of my mind, I always knew that this thing wasn't getting better, only worse. And I knew that when I got called in, the real fun would begin. Alright, that's enough storytelling. I'm going to take my pills now. Nothing good ever happens with my mood when I remember all this. Well, I'll tell you the rest later. But for now, farewell. Surprisingly, whatever this thing was spreading slightly slower than I expected. I was called in the day after I was at the station. Nevertheless, I still had a day to get my bearings, with the help of some sleep. I even managed to spare a little time on some research of this disease. The day after I talked with Geralt, I woke up at around 6 in the morning. It made sense though. I did head off to bed pretty early the previous day. The first thing I did when I woke up was make myself a cup of tea with some toast. When I turned on the TV, I was a bit shocked to see that this thing hadn't made the headlines or even the breaking news, but was simply acknowledged on the bottom of the screen where a few sentences were often repeated, stating that a new virus had made landfall in our surrounding area. Staying indoors was advised to avoid sickness. At that moment, the only thing on my mind was the preservation of human lives, so I was grateful that at least some efforts were being made to stop the infection. The less said of these things, the better. After I finished watching the news, I decided to try and dig up some facts about this new disease, hoping to at least get something that'll give a little background info about the origin or the cause of this virus's effects. At the end of the day, my eyelids were beginning to stick shut because of the dwindling desire I wasted hours upon, while discovering few revelations of the virus that were scattered across the edges of the internet. However, I had found out that the virus was officially called the FB, or flesh-biting virus, which, when it makes contact with blood in a human body, completely eradicates the immune system, and soon after enters the brain where it gains complete control over its actions. It wasn't much, but after a day of non-stop typing, you're really just grateful for whatever you get. Right after supper, Carter gave me a call which I'd completely forgotten about. It took me a while to fish out my phone, which had somehow made its way underneath the couch pillows, but I eventually managed to grab it and pick up the call. "Hey Brad, you there?" he asked. Yeah, I'm here. "How are you?" "Not too good. I still don't know what the hell is happening, and now that Jack and Logan are gone..." He pauses. "Well, it hasn't been easy. What about you?" "Hasn't been great for me either, but I did figure out what happened with Jack and Logan. When that thing bit Jack, some of its fluid got into his bloodstream, and when that happens, the virus takes complete control over you, and does... whatever," I told him. "Well, I wasn't as lucky as you. Nobody's answering my calls." "Wait, what do you mean?" "Family, friends, co-workers. Even the chief's phone just goes to voicemail, and you know he's always on top of the game." He sighs. "Something really fucked up is going on here." And that's when I realized something. Aside from Carter, nobody had called today. While I was processing the information, I heard a doorbell being rung on the other line. "Oh, sorry, gotta go. Someone's here. We'll talk later, all right? Good night," he hurriedly said before I heard the buzz of the decline button. By that point, I was beginning to feel a weariness take over me, but just before I lay down in bed, I decided to call someone up. I put my phone up to my ear to be met with a dull, call failed sound. My eyes cracked open to see a white light creeping through the cracks of my upside-down phone. My ringtone was emanating from it, so I quickly grabbed it and turned it the other way around. My heart skipped a beat when I saw who it was, and I quickly swiped right to answer the call. "Chief, where have you been? You didn't pick up my call last night." "Yeah, sorry about that. I know I usually pick up on the second ring, but lately I've had enough on my back to know where my damn phone was. Look, I don't have much time, but you need to get to the station ASAP. I'm on my way." The phone call ends and I check the time. 4:17 a.m. Above the time, there's an emergency notification sent about an hour before our phone call. "Head indoors immediately. Lock your doors and under no circumstances allow any individuals into your house. Anticipate further notifications." Well, this message sent a chill down my spine as I pulled the covers off me and pulled on my socks. I hastily got on my jeans and flung on my tank top, after which I rushed downstairs to put on my shoes. Once I was outside, I ran inside my BMW and twisted the key for the ignition as my headlights turned on and shone through the darkness in front of me. On the way to the station, the roads were absent of any civilians and humans overall, aside from the lights illuminating rooms in houses, and the other cruisers speeding by and in front of me. As I got closer to the station, I couldn't help but feel a gut feeling emerging in my stomach as memories from a couple of days back flushed into my mind. Of all of us sitting by the campfire before gunshots echo throughout the cabin, and that thing, that monster limping towards me with those cold, lifeless eyes. When it became too much, I didn't know what else to do but turn on the radio. I flicked through the stations trying to find something relaxing. Eventually I managed to settle on some 1960s jazz. When I finally arrived, I saw there were nearly no police cars stationed at the parking lot. As I walked up to the building, I saw there were 2 armed guards standing beside the main entrance. "Name?" one of them asked as he pulled out a clipboard. Brad," I answered. "Last?" "Harrison." After assessing the names on the clipboard a bit longer, he glanced up at me. "You're clear. Head on in." What I found inside can only be described as the most literal clusterfuck I've ever seen. Receptionists were frantically answering phone calls, while police officers were constantly moving from one place to another. Through the chaotic scene, I managed to squeeze through the crowd and find the chief in his office with one hand sliding through his hair and the other holding onto a phone he was breathlessly talking into. I cracked open his door and quickly slid inside. He said a few last words into the phone before feverishly placing it back down on his desk. "Brad, it's good that you're here. Look, I'm sorry I didn't tell you everything before, but..." He stops. It's for the best." "What do you mean?" I ask him, already knowing the answer. "Look, those things that got Jack and Logan. It's this new virus. They thought they could keep it locked up, but of course now the incursion happens. Damn it. Look, son, there's been an outbreak of these biters in an area close to town that stretches all the way to your cabin. Carter's already waiting for you in the car. When you get to the center, Harper will tell you what to do." He leans in a bit closer to me. "If anything goes wrong, I need you to take out as many of those bastards as you can muster before reinforcements arrive, all right?" "You can count on me, sir," I said, proceeding to leave. "And get him in the heart. One shot is all it takes," he shouts just before I shut the door. Still processing the jumble of information the chief has given me, I put on my uniform and found my gear. I can't blame him, though.
he has a lot of things on his hands right now. I jogged to the main entrance where Carter was now waiting for me with the engine on. I jumped in to hear his usual complaints. "Took you long enough. Where have you been?" he questioned. "Just drive," I told him as he pushed on the gas. I wasn't looking forward to our meeting with Harper because me and him had never had the best of relationships. I was almost certain he'd give me a hard time, especially because of the incident last week where I tripped and accidentally spilled my latte all over his shirt. Ever since, he's been giving me annoyed looks whenever the chance comes up. As we entered a tunnel, I turned up the radio to momentarily divert myself from my problems. It took a few seconds for the static to clear up a bit, but when it did, I tuned out all other distractions and tilted my head closer to the radio. "Emergency alert all around the region. Anyone still not inside should reach their household as soon as possible. If your current establishment is not within a 5 to 10 minute drive, then head to one of 9 police checkpoints installed around the city. Refrain from approaching anyone you see outside of your car. If the person you see looks suspicious, contact the authorities and stay away." I promptly turned off the radio, not wanting to instigate any unnecessary thoughts. I glanced at Carter, suddenly remembering I wasn't the only one in the car, but he was still looking at the road, lost in his own ocean of thoughts. When we exited the tunnel, I heard something zoom over us. I lowered my window and saw a couple of helicopters, soaring past us as they searched the ground with their radiant spotlights. The rest of the drive itself wasn't too long, though it seemed to take for hours. As we got closer to our destination, we saw more and more police cruisers blocking exits, as well as occasional SWAT and CDC units roaming the streets. Sometimes we even heard the intermittent pace of gunshots being fired somewhere in the distance. "Where exactly are we going?" I asked. "Sector 2 part of the city. At least that's what Harper said." "Yeah, I was wondering. Have you heard from his captain?" No, actually. I guess you'll have to ask him," Carter responds. When we finally reached our destination, the sight in front of me was ghastly. This nature-friendly environment had lost its pristinity and had now been turned into a full-on government outpost, with law enforcers swarming the area. Petrified civilians were ushered into a designated area as they gave nervous side glances towards a metal fence on the other side of the outpost. As we got out of the car, Carter checked his holster to make sure his pistol was there. I did the same and strapped my shotgun over my shoulder. After asking around, we progressed towards Harper, passing more panicked faces and constantly shielding our eyes and ears from the multiple searchlights, regularly scanning all areas in the outpost, as well as from blaring car sirens just out of view. Everywhere you went, you could see yellow caution tape plastered in between 2 trees leading deeper into the forest. Eventually we found Harper in the middle of it all, barking out orders through his microphone, connected to some loudspeakers. The truck was sitting behind him with a soldier operating a machine gun, nested on its rear end. When we were close enough to him, his deafening voice was cut off as he turned his obnoxiousness towards us. "So where the hell are you 2 idiots been? It's hard enough organizing a bunch of clueless citizens, but when I have to deal with this tardiness..." He silently glared at us, waiting for an apology. "We're sorry, Lieutenant," Carter answers. "Won't happen again." "Hey, by the way, Harper, Lieutenant, where's your captain?" I ask. Harper looks at me dumbstruck, almost like I'd offended him. "Brad, it's none of your business, but if you're so interested, he's at some kind of important meeting. Gave me orders and left me in charge." "Okay," I reply. He looks at me as if expecting more, but embarrassingly realizes that's all I'm going to say, something I take genuine satisfaction from. He sighs before speaking. "All right, I'm only going to say this once, so you better listen closely. Carter, I'm going to need you to keep an eye on the civilians. They're unpredictable right now, so keep them at bay." Carter gives a quick wave to us before leaving. "Mr. Harrison," Harper said as if my name was repulsive. lighting a cigar and looking around the park before speaking. I need you to get on the platform and defend this outpost. He points to a platform situated on top of the same fence the people had quickly moved away from. He was entangled in barbed wire with somebody already standing on the platform. For a moment I can't hear Harper as he continues blabbering on with his instructions, but he quickly notices. And beyond that, hey, are you even listening to me? You've got to work on your attention span, Harrison. If something like this happens again, you're going to get one good talking to from your chief. Sorry, I say, gazing back at Harper. That's sorry, Lieutenant, to you. I look Harper right in the eye, for him to know I'm listening, while using all of my willpower to not strangle him right then and there. He mutters an insult before proceeding with his senseless lecture. Like I was saying, if you get too close to the edge of the fence, you'll get a refreshed definition of the word death. He deliberately puffs out a cloud of smoke, threateningly close to my face. So you better watch out. Well, I don't remember the rest of what he said, but I do remember him giving me a radio to contact me, if anything seems wrong. Before I knew it, I was climbing up the ladder to my temporary job when my foot stepped on the last steel bar, I looked up and saw the person I'd seen up here before. What immediately stood out was his eyes. They looked dull and tired, and when I looked into them, I saw nothing but a dark void beneath. Aside from that, he looked to be in his late 20s, and by the looks of it, his dark uniform hinted at his allegiance with the local SWAT team. His uniform also complemented his assault rifle, which was flung over his shoulder. As I finished my ascent, he gave me a slight nod before looking back in the direction he was previously fixed on. As my eyes gazed lower past the barbed wire at the ominous ground below us, I froze. The dirty roads were littered with corpses of humans and biters alike. What the hell happened here? I shout with dread building up in my voice. It used to be worse. The scouting squad managed to take out the ones near the gate and put out the fires, my nearby companion says in a conventional tone. What scouting squad? I inquire. Just a couple of hours ago. Group went in there, cleared out some of the biters, but they should have been back an hour ago. Nobody can reach them. We stand in silence for a few seconds. Well, we're supposed to keep a lookout for them if they come back. Something about his insouciance seemed familiar, so out of curiosity I asked him a few questions. He introduced himself as Tyler, but that's when something in me clicked, and I remembered the guy from a homicide case we'd worked on years back. Once I reminded him of it, I saw that glint of familiarity flash in his eyes. Sector 2 units are advised to transfer to their nearby outpost. Air Force Command has noticed a large number of biters shifting to the western area of the city. Proceed with caution and keep a lookout. After listening to the message coming from our radios, Tyler releases a breath before speaking. Did I ever tell you she was one of my mom's friends? No, you didn't. Were they close? I ask. Not really, but she was sensitive about these things. Barely talked to anyone during those weeks. He sighed, almost like remembering an old wound that had never really healed. Deciding to lighten him up, I changed the subject to something more nostalgic. It took a while, but eventually he managed to crack a smile. In fact, at one point we were laughing so badly, Tyler nearly tipped over the railing that separated us from the barbed wire. After that, our chuckles began to die down, and I started to hear the faint growls in the distance. After a while, it started to get irritating, but I didn't dare say a word. Better safe than sorry. Well, eventually I got bored with my subconscious staring contest with the carcasses. Even though our chatter somewhat blocked out the groans, they were still starting to drive me mad. A change in scenery was imminent. So I casually looked over my shoulder to look at what was happening behind me. The world seemed to have lost some of its colors. Almost like some of the life it used to possess had drained out of it. Everything seemed so apocalyptic. It was like the universe itself was desperately dragging itself along with time, trying its best not to fall behind. More and more civilians were being brought into safe houses, while patrols kept a wide eye on the roads. Just as I was trying to get a closer look at what was happening, something shone in my face and I put my hand up in front of me to block out the luminous light. Once the shimmers of the glare had left the unprotected spaces between my fingers, I looked back at the main road and saw a minivan had driven up to our outpost, filled with intoxicated teens who were drunkenly smashing the side of their vans while letting out loud, boisterous hoots. A couple of officers eventually got beside their vehicle, and once they intimidated the driver of the minivan to open his window, the officers tried to get the teenagers to calm down and follow their given instructions. However, as each passing second came and went, the air got silent and tense as the drunks stood firm on their refusal to comply as the officers' voices raised in pitch. Eventually the cops lost their patience, and after radioing in a few more officers, they unbuckled their batons, readying for a full-on push. And then something happened nobody was ready for. The driver of the minivan hollered, "You ain't never taken me alive," before yanking back his gear to drive and speeding straight through the barricade tape as his tires stridently screeched. The minivan made sharp turns and unexpected curves as law units jumped out of its way while they clumsily got out their pistols and began to fire at its tires, attempting to slow it down. The bullets seemed to be made out of plastic, though, since most of them just kept bouncing off the wheels. As shots continued to ring in the air, I cursed under my breath while simultaneously getting out my Remington and firing off my own few rounds when the van was close enough, managing to get a big enough hole in one of the tires for it to become completely defective. But even as more and more of its tires kept losing air, the scarcity of friction on the ground kept the van sliding in the direction of the opposite side of our fence, where people were standing on an alternative platform. It was only when the minivan was mere meters from their platform that they jumped off, barely making it to safety, just as the caravan violently crashed through the fence, creating a wide gap in it, and toppling the platform in the process. After that, the driver seemed to have lost control of his vehicle because it steered off course and was speeding straight towards an alleyway corner. A couple of the van's passengers managed to jump out through its windows just before it collided with a wall, its loud crash rippling the air around it. Officers rushed to the scene with medics not far behind. The runners were the first ones repressed, and not long after, a cuffed group of them was being ushered into a truck with bars serving as windows, while the other group was hastily being led into an ambulance. While everyone was busy gaping at what had unfolded before them, I was far more focused on the ever-growing moaning coming from the far right corner of the building the van had driven into. A knot formed in my stomach as my hand gripped the stock of my shotgun. And then a decrepit head appeared, followed by a rotten body and finally its bruised legs. But that wasn't all. There was a small group trudging along with it. But when they spotted the crowd before them, their trudging turned into a charge. "Get out of there!" I instinctively clamored as I took 2 shots at the thing's torso, while the shotgun vigorously hit my chest plate. Shrieks erupted from below me as the medic's grips loosened, and the now sober teens scrambled past puzzled officers. As the other teens in the truck desperately rattled the bars blocking their escape, the deputies, with seemingly little experience, paid no mind to them and slowly retreated back into the outpost, even as they tried to steady as many shots at the incoming biters as possible. Their aim always seems just a bit off. On top of that, this only irritates the biters as they quicken their approach. The other officers hurry their way aside. One stands out from the rest, attempting to stop the biters with a strict order for them to halt. By the time he realizes the true nature of these things, one has already assailed him. By the time SWAT members arrive and take out the remainder of the biters, the courageous officer is sprawled on the floor, convulsing in the same black substance Jack did back at the cabin. Everybody was reluctant at the thought of what had to be done. Most were stalling or calming their fellow workers, telling them it would be okay throughout this
You want him to become one of those things.
A few long seconds pass, after which an officer reluctantly retrieves his pistol and, leveling it at the man's skull, he whispers something before a reverberating bang echoes through the base. Some that know the man stay transfixed on the crimson liquid blossoming from his head, while others turn away and bury their hands in their face, including the person that put him out of his misery. Before long, white hazmat suits have arrived and split into two groups. One started patching up the gap in the metal fence, while the other carefully examined the now cool corpse of the officer before gingerly picking it up and carrying him away. As much as I wanted to mourn for the poor soul like the rest, I couldn't ignore the all but familiar scent burgeoning through the air. As much as I wanted to chalk it up to my lately overactive senses, it became harder and harder to do so as the smell strengthened to a point where it seemed nearly palpable.
Holy shit! Look at how many there are!
Tyler points to an area about 30 meters from us at approximately 1 o'clock from our point of view. No less than 40 biters are making their way closer and closer to our position. Even though I know we don't have much time, I can't help myself but think, wow, are they so pissed off about losing a handful of their buddies that they send 5 times as many? Mentally scolding myself for wasting time, I silently pull out my radio and pin down the speech button. My breath crackles through it as I begin to speak. We spotted a biter horde advancing towards the Midwest outpost. Over. I peer back at Harper, who's still standing on his imaginary throne. He looked to be talking to a frustrated family of 3 standing next to him, but now frozen in his tracks. He gives me a quick glance as to confirm what I was saying was true, to which I nod. He hurriedly sends the family away before snatching his own radio and putting it up to his mouth. Through my intercom, I heard, "Code Blue, I repeat, Code Blue. All available law personnel in Sector 2 report to their defensive points. Medical personnel get their civilians to safety." Officers speedily jogged to their positions, swiftly ducking under whatever cover they could find to safely shoot through the small openings in the metal fence. SWAT members either team with the police or obstruct the gap abandoned by the defenseless hazmat suits, which are long scattered by now. The biters are aware of our presence and have begun running. Tyler already has his assault rifle in hand, and after one look at me for preparation, fires off his first few rounds, followed by a series of gunfire from below the platform. Ignoring the cold sensation of the metal in my hands, I nimbly pull back the fore end of my Remington and aim at the first biter in sight. A gauge blows out of the gun, and my head is sharply tilted upwards. When I glance back down, the biter seems to be dead, but by that point other biters are already trampling past his body. I took another shot to the chest of a biter just ahead of his crowd. This process repeated a few more times, but even though my shots were reinforced by sporadic outbursts of the semi-autos, the waves just kept coming. At one point the biters reached the SWAT members holding a makeshift barricade for the gap. The first one went down quickly, but as more bodies began to pile up, it became harder for them to adjust the movement of their guns. Eventually, the SWAT team was overwhelmed and became vulnerable, something the biters took advantage of as they entered the outpost. My radio burst to life, and through the static I could make out, "Breach the Sector 2 outpost. Immediate backup requested." The machine gun, which up until now was wary of its bullets taking down the fence, lets out a barrage of gunfire down on the biters inside, temporarily halting their flood into the outpost. I look at Tyler, who's entranced by this whole ordeal. "Those biters are going to reach us any second. We gotta jump," I apprehensively shouted at him. He snaps out of it and jumps over the railing, down onto the floor. I follow and land with a sharp pain escalating through my leg. I ignore it and rush to Tyler, but just before I reach him, a group of officers block my way, shooting and taking out some of the biters coming after them. I look behind me and see multiple of those things ripping out pieces of flesh from their victims. They turn to me, and I know I don't have any other choice. I start running, I don't know where I'm going, but anywhere as long as those things aren't there. My foot catches on a rock, and I collapse on the hard stone beneath me. As I'm getting up, I see the machine gun truck now surrounded by biters. In a desperate move, it takes out as many as it can, before one grabs onto its side and jumps on the gun operator before crawling inside to the driver. The wails nearly make my body uncontrollably fall back down, but I get back up, trying to regain my bearings. I look forward and meet eyes with a biter a mere yard away. Its neck is snapped backward, with its head entangled in bulging veins, while ghostly white eyes are buried deep within its sockets. It screeches a guttural scream before sprinting right at me. I fire my shotgun, but I miss each time. It springs right on top of me, and I shut my eyes, waiting for that fatal bite. Boom! My eardrums ring as the thing flops down threateningly close to my throat. I push it aside and see the shallow image of a cloth-torn Carter. He offers me a hand, and I grasp it. "Thought you'd still be here," he said, while pulling me up. "Look, I hate to say it, but if Harper doesn't do anything, then we're done. We've got to get to him, and I don't think we'll make it together, so we'll have to split up." I stop as Carter is already running in the opposite direction. I guess he wants to live just a little bit more than me. Without thinking another word, I turn away from Carter and dash in the direction I'd last seen Harper, unholstering my Glock. After taking out a few more biters, I found Harper stranded in his thoughts, surrounded by a SWAT team taking out anything that got too close to them. Reasoning that my quick-thinking efforts weren't as stupid as I first thought, I hastily made my way to Harper. Ignoring my obligation of exulting, I anxiously warn him. "Harper, we're not going to last much longer out here. Are we going to receive backup anytime soon?" "Backup? You still thinking we're going to get some kind of backup? Look around you, this place is beyond repair," he exclaimed. I stared at what was happening around me, and I quickly realized that what was happening was terrible. We were getting pushed back more and more, with people within our own ranks turning on each other. Chaos emerged as guards deserted medics, medics deserted civilians, and civilians deserted each other. You could see friends looking for friends and panicked families looking for their kids, while other civilians just wanted to get out of here. Harper was right. We couldn't stop this alone anymore. As minutes passed, we kept losing more and more fronts, and soon the biters had us cornered, with fallen civilians and law units making up nearly half of them. Even though it was hard firing on our own, we knew that they were gone and our deaths were almost inevitable. But that didn't mean it had to be in vain, and we weren't going down without a fight. We gathered the remnants of our supplies and manpower and made a last stand. Ammunition was scarce, sure, but using our weapons as melee would have to do. Some put pistols in their mouths, while others believed that if we did this now, we'd buy enough time for the government to do something. All we could do was keep hope. One by one, people sacrificed themselves by throwing themselves at the mob of biters. I watched as the person in front of me was shredded within the thing's teeth. I knew it was my turn. I turned my Glock upside down, ready to join whatever place those who die go to. Just as I raised my arm to land my final blow, I heard a fusillade of bullets from behind me, followed by a rapid sound slicing the air. I turned around and saw 4 local military rescue helicopters shelling the biters in front of us. Everybody swiftly made space for the landing helicopters, while the biters, enraged as ever, charged at the survivors, determined to leave no one alive. "All remaining in Sector 2. It has been compromised. Fall back to the helicopters." Muffled voices on the radio spoke as people frantically scrambled onto the copters. The chopper's automatic rifles were now reloading, and the remaining ammo in our guns barely made a dent into the uprising horde of biters. By the time I finally found an open space, people were getting tackled by biters left and right, screaming through the pain. I knew this was my last chance. I jumped into one of the helicopters just as I felt it jolt upright, and it began to rise from the ground and fly upwards. The other choppers quickly followed, but a staggering amount of biters managed to reach one of the helicopters just before it took off. They swarmed the cockpit, forcing the chopper to spin out of control and crash back into the ground, with a cloud of smoke emanating from its broken figure. The other copters, including mine, just barely escaped before we suffered the same fate. The cool air brushed against my face as we reached a higher altitude. It's over, I thought, just as I heard a growl come from beside me. I quickly looked to my right and saw a SWAT member sitting next to me. But when I looked into his eyes, I saw nothing but a pale abyss of a long, dead human.
Part 3. An explosion rattles the helicopter we're in. I look down at the demolished helicopter and see a bright orange haze blocking my view. As it dissipates, I see the downed copter is now nothing but a disfigured mess of ash and metal. Another growl shakes me from my trance as I take another look to my right and see that the thing is nearly on top of me. Without another thought, I grab the shoulders of its bulletproof vest and begin to push it to the edge of the chopper. The people around me quickly realize the situation and begin screaming and kicking the biter sitting next to me, creating a loud commotion in the plane and blocking any shots from being fired. The biter turns its attention to the other people on board, and I know I only have seconds before we end up like the helicopter beneath us. Despite the heavy armor hanging on the thing's limbs, after gathering all the remaining energy I had in my muscles, I shoved that thing as far out with my arms as I could. I lost my grasp on the biter as I felt my hands give out and sharply turn downwards. The thing's fading screech was the only thing that made me realize that throughout the whole ordeal I hadn't taken a single breath. I took in a huge portion of air before crawling back deeper into the airplane. The crowd inside's huddling in the middle, no one wanting to accidentally slip and fall to their deaths. The military personnel on board hastily putting restraints on the outer edge part of the plane to keep a locked and safe perimeter. A few people wearing a thick all-camo outfit managed to slowly but surely make their way towards me without causing too much inconvenience. "Sir, are you all right? We saw you single-handedly take down that biter. We're sorry we couldn't support you, but with all the civilians..." One of them, presumably the sergeant, spoke up. "It's all right. No more lives were lost. That's what matters," I say, peeking through the constraints being installed on my side of the copter. "We're going to have to check you, though," he responds. "Can't have any more of those things on board." As his men begin to closely inspect me, he continues. "You feeling well? No signs of lightheadedness, tight chest, difficulty breathing?" As the short answers to his questions near an end, the soldiers around me wrap up their observations, and their commander tells me that you could call it a miracle that no other people were close enough to me to have spread the infection. "You handled that situation fairly well. Judging by your uniform, you're a cop, aren't you? How many years you been in the service?" he curiously asked. About 6 years now. Been a hell of a ride. Used to be..." The copter violently shakes before I can finish. We all struggle to find something to hang on to against the turbulence. The helicopter eventually calms, and we regain our balance. "Not as much of a hell as this, huh?" the commander says, still clutching the metal bar he'd found at the side of the copter. He shakes his head and looks at me. "When we heard the distress signal coming from your area, they sent out the first aircrafts they could get their hands on." He stops and goes silent for a moment. "Didn't expect to see so many of you here. I mean, more helicopters were on the way, so it wouldn't have been so crowded, but how could it have happened so damn fast?" he ponders, lost in thought. I take the time to take a better look through the gaps in the outside entrance of the copter. After struggling to get back up, my legs eventually regained balance on the metal floor. I peered out onto the ground and saw that the emergency broadcasts were doing a good job with keeping people inside. Nearly all houses had their lights on, with their cars in the parking lot, with no one visible on the ground. Suddenly I get the urge to ask the first thing that was supposed to pop up in my head. "Sir, do you mind telling me where exactly our destination lies?" The military commander turns to face me and automatically speaks. "Oh, nowhere special. If you're interested, well, away from those biters at least." Before he trails off again, I repeat my question in a more aggravated tone. "Where are we going, sir?" His response sends me off guard as he looks me straight in the eye and sternly says, "You'll know when we land. Sit tight." Well, that instantly shuts me up, and the rest of the trip is pretty quiet, aside from the daily coughs and sneezes similar to the ones in public transport. The commander made occasional announcements, telling us not to panic and that we were going to be brought somewhere safe. He also instructed everyone to hand over all their gadgets and any kind of weapons they were carrying. After a thorough search through our bags and pockets, he also addressed everyone in the police force, including me, to not contact our superiors or any other colleagues via radio. Even though I didn't receive any news about the progression of the outbreak, the radios the military held were still on. Unfortunately, that didn't help my case, as the few times the military personnel on board did use them, their codes were so scrambled that trying to decipher it would lead to an irritating headache within minutes. However, after a while of this, I felt my ears begin to pop and noticed we were slowly dropping altitude. I still couldn't see where we were supposed to arrive, but I was starting to notice fewer shelters on the ground and overall a more rural landscape the further we flew from the city. I was considering asking again my question, now that we were close, when the commander made another announcement. "All right, listen up. We're preparing to land at our destination. You'll have multiple guards escorting you into the building, so don't even think about trying anything. And don't struggle. It'll make the whole ordeal so much simpler." He paused. "And safer." The next thing I know, the helicopter slowly began to drop downward, and I saw a group of guards standing outside. When the copter touched the ground beneath us, and its propellers slowly came to a stop, a number of soldiers emerged from the group of armed men and split us up into 3 smaller groups. I ended up in the second group, and watched as the first group was taken away by the first batch of soldiers waiting outside. As they walked away, I saw another helicopter had landed in another helipad not far from us. People from inside the plane began to walk out, and I saw a familiar teen walk out and start a fuss. Well, I thought other soldiers and his buddies were trying to warn him, but I didn't get the time to see because just as he pushed a commanding officer with a leap of strength, the soldier came up to him and smashed the butt of his rifle against the teen's face with brute force. The teen dropped, and I saw 2 men pick him up and carry away his limp body. As the scene faded, I heard a gruff voice telling us to get out of the plane. We did what he said, and once we were out, the soldiers patted our sides and pockets, and we began walking in the direction of the building in front of us. It had no extraordinary marks outside from the greyish haze that coated the surface of its 3-story floors. I tilted my head around just enough to inspect my surroundings and not cause any suspicion. I glanced at the guards and saw that their faces were calm and still, but their hands tightly gripped the M4s at their sides. I also managed to sneak a look over my shoulder and guessed that we were in the middle of nowhere, since there was nothing in sight aside from a few distant trees. I hadn't noticed how my pace had slowed down as I continued to hastily look around. "Hey, move it, officer. This ain't a museum," the soldier behind me said as he forcefully nudged me forward. I annoyingly pulled my hand away and continued to move forward. When we reached the building, I saw another task force was already waiting for us just outside the entrance. The previous soldiers that were with us left and went back to the helicopter, while the new troopers took us in. Inside, the first thing that showed up was a hallway with offices on either side, all leading up to a set of stairs. We were tentatively escorted up the stairs leading to the second floor, where a lounge of some sort stood. Before we even had time to get off the chairs, we again found ourselves being pushed up and continued walking until we reached the next floor, where I saw 6 cages strategically positioned across the walls. 3 on each side, and 1 already occupied with the first group that had got out of the copter. This was the final straw for all of us.
everyone in my group began to berate the soldiers with bitter comments, relating to the fact that there was no way any of us were going in there. I watched the first group, expecting them to rise up with us, but all they did was pitifully stare at us. Soon enough, the soldiers' warnings to temper our anger proved to be pointless, and that's when they began aiming their guns at us and were nearly screaming at us to get in the cage. Well, this quieted the collective anger we held, as one of the soldiers placed a keycard on the lock, and one by one we begrudgingly stepped into the cage. When we were inside, the soldiers shut the door and went to check on the other group. What I hadn't really realized was that, aside from me, there were only 2 other people with me in my group, but it always seemed like we had more. After a few minutes of thought and silence, one of the people with us walked up to me and offered a hand. "Name's Rob." "Brad. Pleasure," I said as he observed me in my uniform. So you were on the front lines. Must have been nice seeing all that action." "You bet," I remarked sarcastically. Just then we heard shouts come from the distance. I saw a rowdy group, just a bit bigger than ours, come in arguing with the guards. "Get your hands off me. I can walk alone," I heard someone yell in the group. "We already told you we're not getting in those darn cages, so why don't you just take that shiny rifle of yours and shove it up your—" That's when one of the soldiers had enough and pointed his rifle threateningly close to the guy making insults. And just like us, their protests stopped rather quickly, and they got into the cage beside us one by one. As they were entering the cage, I took a close look at all of them, and when the last person from their group stepped inside, I instantly recognized who he was. "Tyler, oh my God, I thought you were dead. Where were you back there?" Tyler turned around to face me, and I saw a look of shock and relief on his face. "Brad, good to see you still standing. I thought I saw you at one point back at the outpost, but there were just so many people, and those biters were everywhere." He looked upward, as if he was trying to recall something. "I can't remember a thing. Last thing I know, I'm getting shoved into a helicopter. Then I wake up and we're soaring through the air. Then those soldiers, assholes." Suddenly a thought came to the front of my mind. Hey, were you on that helicopter where those guards knocked out that kid from earlier?" "What kid? Oh, yeah, I was on the copter with him. Frankly, he was annoying the hell out of everyone during the trip. Warning after warning. Thought they'd carry him away or something, but they couldn't handle it. Gee, I hope he's okay now, though," Tyler answered. We stood behind the barbed walls in front of us, as we both thought back about what had happened. "You know," Tyler began, "how do you start in a battlefield defending your nation only to be repaid by being shoved into a small confined cage with nothing but a rusty sink and toilet? I mean, we should be treated like veterans, not like some kind of prisoners. Could have at least given us a nice small room with some essentials." He laughed. Guess they really want to keep us on edge." I chuckled. "And chances are, nobody even knows." "Wait, what do you mean no one knows? You have some people you know here, right? They'll notice you're missing, now that the truth is out there." I don't know. I didn't get called in when this thing started. Local military didn't hear about it for a while. They didn't tell us when this whole thing had started. Didn't tell us when it got here. Hell, they're still probably not telling anyone what happened back there. Probably already contacting our families and friends, I disclose. "But they couldn't just hide all this, could they?" We stood there silently, once again getting lost in thought, when Rob approached. "Wait, you didn't know any of this?" he says in a surprised tone. "Well, I don't know about my colleagues since I was on vacation, but in terms of protocol, they should have contacted me earlier. Chances are everyone's orders were delayed until the last second." "Wow. They really wanted to keep this a secret from everyone, huh? Didn't they realize all of this would just lead to, well, why didn't they just send all of you out?" "Because they thought they could stop it." An aged voice came from behind us. We turned to see a man, probably in his mid-60s, standing in a crouched position on the other side of his cage.
His white hair was brushed to the side of his head. His chin was shaven, but he wore a pale face with tired eyes. "They did it once. Thought they could get away with it again," he said, almost like he was recollecting a past moment in his life. "What do you mean, they do it again? This is the first time the police and military force have encountered this kind of outbreak at this scale. I mean, if they hadn't, we wouldn't be standing here in this godforsaken cage," I exclaimed. That was the idea. Dealt with it once. Comes up again, no sweat. But that's not what happened." We stared at him with curiosity, waiting for him to continue. "There was a similar case once when I was still fit to serve. I was on a patrol when they called us in. The voice sounded urgent, desperate even. By the time we arrived, most of the action had already wrapped up, but I still heard the last gunshots and the last screams, even with the windows closed. I hadn't noticed, aside from us, there were also agents, probably the FBI, already scanning the area. They hurriedly led us away, but I managed to catch a glimpse of something I was never meant to see. Someone shot out of there. Looked like an officer, but something about him was off. He was about to jump on someone, and I heard a shot ring out. I didn't want to see the rest of it in any case. Well, I played dumb afterward during the interviews, but my God, how many years have passed." His fingertips rubbed the surface of his closed eyelids in an exhausted manner. They know how to keep you silent. They'll learn everything about you, keep you in line with such intimidation. Well, it's only when you're an old man like me, when your days are numbered, you don't care how many threats they throw at you." He sighed and looked at me. "I'm sorry what you had to see today, son. If they release us, I want you to get as many other people as you can and get as far away from this place as possible. It's only a matter of time." I nodded at him with empathy in my eyes. Before he looked away, I asked, "Hey, I didn't catch your name." He turned his attention back to me. "Almost forgot. Chris. My name's Chris," he rasped, just as we began to hear the familiar voices of struggle come from the stairs below us. I don't remember how much time passed as we all sat in those cages. Sometimes people would be brought in and shoved into nearby cages or sent to another sector altogether. Aside from surveying us 24/7, they had daily checks on us concerning any symptoms or temperatures we may have had. Some people tried to defy their authority by not answering their questions, but by the third day, there wasn't any hesitation in complying with what they said. There weren't any visible clocks, and the only thing keeping me on track with time were the meals they brought us each day, and the nightly lights out they would announce as they walked by each cell. Well, this time was no different. We were in the middle of a discussion when the main lights turned off and the backup ones came on. We heard footsteps walk past ourselves, doing the usual drill. We all said our goodnights, and I lumbered off in the direction of the crimson darkness. "Good morning, sleepy asses. Don't care how you slept. Need all ears and eyes now." I was suddenly awoken by the commander's voice, people drowsily rubbing their eyes and looking at him. "Everyone get to the back of your confinement. The following called up will step up to the front of their cell and wait until given further instructions. We have all your personal data, know what you look like, so anyone that decides to commit identity fraud will be severely punished." We all moved to the back of our cages as he began reading the names on his list. "Why do you think they're calling people up?" Rob whispered to me, probably questioning from what I guess. Commander finished reading the list and ended with a final name, Brad Harrison. Well, after the initial shock of hearing my name, I walked to the front of my cage and turned around. Rob was peering at me with worried eyes, while Chris looked at me with confidence, almost determination. "Do not attempt to struggle while we extract you from your cell," the officer said as nearby units began unlocking our cages. The gate to my cell opened and I began to step out. Before they had me in the handcuff position, I managed to catch a glimpse at Tyler, who gave me an approving nod as he lined up in front and began to walk forward. We were all pulled out of our cells and watched as the rest of the soldiers moved to the other sectors while we began to head towards the stairs. Even though this would have been a great opportunity to make a run for it, something kept all of us intact, almost like a feeling that we should just follow the guard's orders. We headed down to the next floor and entered the room with the lounge I'd previously seen the first time I was on these stairs. We walked past most of the room when I saw a single door on the left at the end of it. Beside the door, 2 soldiers were standing with rifles in hand. One of them pulled out a keycard and used it to open the door we were heading for. Once we were inside the well-lit room, we saw a few groups were already there, sitting on separate aluminum benches that you'd see in stadiums. We started moving towards an empty bench when I noticed something. On all the benches there were regular people in civilian clothing, aside from one member in every other group. Unlike the civilians around them, they wore a uniform, but not one of a guard, but more similar to one of a commanding officer. Well, I didn't have time to ponder that thought, as we were all ushered onto the bench, and just like in the other groups, a man older than me but younger than Chris was already waiting for us. We sat down just as a higher-ranking soldier came to the middle of the room and waited for the few, nearly inaudible whispers to stop before he cleared his throat. Now I can guess what you're probably thinking right now. The commander started with a friendly but firm voice. And after all you've been through, I can't say I blame you. However, we needed to be aware of those infected and those not, because if one more mistake was made, it'd be over for all of us. Know that your family and friends have been contacted, and you just might have a chance to see them again. The outbreak you previously witnessed has been suppressed, and the majority of the biters have been taken out by the military. That said, our local military forces have exhausted all their weaponry and manpower in eradicating the biters, and aside from keeping the city on lockdown, they barely have enough men to patrol half of the quarantined off-zone, meaning for now, they're temporarily defective in the fight. The quarantined area is large in perimeter, and any open space can prove vital for the biters if they find a way out and, well, fatal to us. Military outside of our own has only recently received the news of the outbreak, and by the time they arrive, well, every second counts, and in any case, their inexperience will cost them many lives if they do arrive on time. But you, my friends, well, you have that experience, the one essential in wiping out these things from the face of the earth. But there's another reason why we put such high faith in you. We gathered you all here because you are trained men in defending the nation. You know what these things are, and you know how to deal with them. Without you, these biters could escape, and all the armies we have won't be enough to stop them. So I give you an offer. You can either back out now and return back to your cell, get released, and hope you can live a normal life soon, or you can do the entire world a favor and end this nightmare for good. Everyone in the room is silent, deciding what to do next. No one leaves. Good choice, the commander asserts, catching everyone's eye in the room. Now, before you go, I'd like you to meet someone. This is Professor Lestings, he conveys, pointing to a middle-aged man with white hair and bags under his eyes, emerging from one of the seats far back. He'll explain the procedures needed to be executed if someone within your group gets bitten, and if you haven't already heard them, the protocols. The commander sits down on one of the free spaces on the benches as the professor gets on stage. Thank you for the introduction, Captain. As you've heard, I'm Professor Lestings, the head medical personnel in this facility. From what you've seen, I've no doubt you know how to eliminate a flesh biter, but there are some things you are missing that could be critical in saving your life in an encounter with one of those biters. You see, when someone gets bitten, the substance emitted from the biter takes control over the brain, making the victim amenable to the virus's actions. The exact origin of this virus is not precisely known, as well as the exact location of its outbreak. The virus's effects are fairly rapid, and the scale of infection has been unexpected, to say the least. One of the main factors concerning the proliferation of these biters is the hesitation. The creation of an antidote is still in progress for the initial stages of the infection, where redemption is still possible. However, a cure is not yet being created, so in the case of infection, it'll take the virus a maximum of 2 to 3 minutes to take a hold of the host, before they'll have to be terminated to stop the virus from operating in their system. The professor then looked at all of us and changed his tone. This is the last point where you can turn back, as when you enter the quarantined area, no one will be let in or out until all the biters are eliminated, and before their threat becomes insurmountable. Part 4. The dog repeated the other protocols, and after he'd finished, we were all combined into groups of 12 to form task forces, ensuring the last of the biters were taken out. We were taken through the main procedures of the plan, and, after we were all ready, we hastily gathered all our equipment and got on the copters. During the short flight, I wondered what would happen when we got there, still nagged by the unnerving memory of seeing the blue veins spread across the insides of the biter's face. My commander seemed to notice and questioned me about it. You alright, champ? You're looking a little stale. I'm fine, Commander, just reviewing the plan, that's all, I said with a weak smile. I know what you saw out there. Those things ain't pretty. They take away whatever they can get their hands on from you, but life ain't easy and you just have to get through these things sometimes. And if we don't do this now, then we'll never get the chance to do it again. He looked me in the eye. Yeah, you're right, Commander. You're right. He began leaning back on his chair when I asked him, Have you ever seen anything like this? He turned around, surprised, and slowly answered my question. No, I haven't. Why'd you ask? It's nothing, just whether this has happened or not, those biters are going to go back where they belong. Oblivion. The commander's concerned look turned into a smile. There's hope for you yet, kid. I noticed the helicopters were beginning to lower, and we all braced ourselves for the last impact. Once the copters touched the ground, we all got a hold of our rifles and jumped out onto the grass. As we began jogging towards the barbed fence, I took in the familiar surroundings I'd seen the last time I was here. Caution tape was still loosely hanging around the park, with the usual sounds of birds chirping long gone. As we got closer to the entrance of the quarantine zone, I saw soldiers, dressed similarly as us, wearing dark gear with gas masks attached to their heads. They were heavily guarding the entrance of the zone and patrolling the nearby area. A medical tent was set up not far from the troops, with both them and medical personnel present. To top it all off, there were a few heavy armored trucks situated next to the guards, machine guns loaded on top, like the ones I'd seen earlier. We all came up to the troops standing next to the entryway, and our commander came forward to talk with the guards. Back to going in for the final scan. Understood. You're clear to move out. Be careful out there. We haven't heard from the last group that went in for a while. Acknowledged. We'll stay cautious. Our commander responded to the guard, before the soldier unlocked the gate and radioed of our arrival before we moved in. We stood in a shaded area where the sun's rays were unable to penetrate the thick branches above us. There was a path leading deeper into the park, which I knew would turn into a dirt trail if we went further. Aside from the path, there were no other buildings in sight and no real other direction to follow. Before we moved forward, our captain reminded us that our objective is to explore our sector in the forest and check every structure in the area, until we reached the other side of the zone from where we'd return to the main entrances and await further orders, if there were any. We followed the passage through the woods and eventually reached a clearing where we saw a few wooden houses with one standing out from the rest, containing 2 stories, all scattered across the field. We entered the small cabins first, with nothing particularly special in them, except for the furniture left by the owners. Next we went to the bigger house, where our actions became more ginger, as we opened the rusty door and heard its creaks echo throughout the old house's insides. We moved in with our weapons close and ready to fire, as we went from room to room. With the first floor empty, we went up the stairs to reach the second. The first room we saw had an open doorway with a hand peeking out at us. Out of instinct, someone in my group fired, but our commander quickly silenced us. As the view of the room itself became more clear, We saw that the arm belonged to a dead corpse of what we thought was a biter, considering the black pool surrounding it, a bullet already implanted inside its chest. It wasn't long before we left the building and continued to explore the rest of the area. Aside from the occasional notifications we got of more squads entering the zone, the process monotonously repeated itself to the point where we were actually getting bored walking over sticks and dodging branches. As we moved out of a particularly crowded area, all of our radios suddenly burst into life. "Hello," someone said in a panicked voice, shots ringing in the background. "This is Pack 4 in the Midwest, requesting immediate reinforcements. We're close to a tall yellow building. Biters have overrun our..." The voice stopped as a blood-curdling screech could be heard in the background as all noise cut off. After a moment of silence, the commander pulled out his radio and put his mouth to it. "Pack 4, can you give us your exact coordinates?" "No," answer. "Pack 4, do you copy? All available squadrons move into the Midwest area of the quarantine zone. Keep an eye out for any signs of a yellow structure." The commander lowered his radio, taking out a pair of binoculars, and began looking around. "There," he says, pointing behind us. We turned around, and sure enough, behind the storm of branches, a yellow building just tall enough to stretch its neck out of the woods was situated past the trees in front of us. "We're probably the closest squad to them. If we hurry, we can probably make it. Come on." We ran past the twigs slicing our faces, the mud below us sloshing under our boots as the building we were heading for kept getting bigger in size. The closer we got, the clearer the shouts and gunshots were heard up ahead. When we were close enough, we slowed down our run as we carefully looked around the bushes. The sounds of struggle had ceased, and all that could be heard now were low, deep growls. Even though I didn't want to believe it, my fears were confirmed when I took a glance out of my crouched position and saw bodies lying on the floor. The crossfire had stopped, and it looked like the biters had been victorious as they roamed the woods in front of us, some wearing military attire. A specific biter caught my attention. Even from the back, I think he was in one of the cells in the same room that I was in. His face slowly turned to face me, and I swiftly hid behind a tree before he spotted me. I looked to the commander, who was motioning us to prepare to kill all remaining biters. He began a countdown from 3 to 2 to 1. We all aimed our rifles at the closest target and fired. Momentarily stunned at the sudden attack, the biters immediately reacted and charged us. We continued to shoot off our rounds, making sure to always have someone covering us when we were reloading. Our surprise attack couldn't last forever, and the vast numbers of biters caught up to us. They all came down at us at once, and despite our best efforts to only shoot at the biters, our shots got caught up, both the biters and our own squad members, with only a few managing to push the biters off them and land a bullet into the heart. Suddenly a figure jumped up behind the horde of biters and proceeded to gun down a large portion of the things storming towards us. Well, his distraction allowed us to take out the remaining biters in view. However, a lone biter managed to break through his defense, tackling him to the floor. Just as the biter tore the M4 out of his hands and sharply pulled back its head, I put a fatal round into its back, causing its body to fall to the ground and go still. The figure pushed the biter off him, panting with dirt covering every inch of him. When he saw me, his face relaxed, and he let out a laugh. I gave him a hand, which he grasped, and I helped him up. "So now we're even," I say. "Well, I guess we are," Carter replied. Someone shot at the sky to see if the noise would attract any hidden biters. We heard more moans coming from inside the forest. "Well, as much as a touching reunion would be nice, we need to finish the task at hand. Do you know if any of your squad members are still alive?" "Well, I don't think so. Most of them got bitten. I saw a couple of them further into the woods, but I don't think any of them made it far." We checked if Carter had any bites or scratch marks. He seemed to be in the clear. The commander decided to take him in, and we informed him of our mission. Things ran smoothly from there, and we briskly got past the few remaining standing biters, all up until we reached the end of the zone, where we were preparing to head back. "Hey, I think we missed a building," said Carter as we all looked at what he was pointing at. The silver laboratory lay hidden within the trees, with no sign of anybody already having checked it. The remainder of our group strode to the front doors of the lab. It wasn't locked, and we didn't know if a few kicks would do it, so for safe measure, one person from our group got a sledgehammer, and we eventually battered down the door. The feeling when we stepped inside was foreboding. The weak light of the exit sign barely illuminated the ominous reception area in front of us. We turned the flashlights on our rifles on to get a better view of our surroundings. As we got closer to the front desk, we saw what looked to be a nurse sprawled over the floor. It was clear dry blood was flowing down from her skull onto her white dress. There were 2 dim hallways on either side, and we split up, separating me from Carter. The doors were all closed, but not locked like the front ones. We directed the muzzle of our guns at the handle of a nearby door, and carefully pulled it open. As soon as it was ajar, a biter in military gear crashed through, throwing himself on the wall. He grabbed the first person within arm's reach, and we instantaneously reacted and fired at the level of the biter's chest until he went limp. I reloaded as the commander and the others went to scan the room. I followed suit, and we went inside the room, finding a scientist laying on the floor with a Glock lying near his chest. We quickly examined the other rooms before moving on to the stairs. Our commotion had brought about more biters from the upper floor, as we took out a couple of them tripping over the stairs and rolling down, breaking just about every remaining bone that was intact in their body. We boosted up the stairs before any of the biters decided to investigate what was happening. When we reached the next floor, there were a few infected scientists wandering the lab's main testing rooms. When they saw us, they began shuffling slowly towards us. The area was persistently getting hit by my rifle. Flashes emanated from my M4, and the biters fell one by one. Me and another person from my squad entered through a door leading to another office. My bright flashlight shone into the dark room, dust flying all around. There didn't seem to be any bodies or biters on the floor, so far anyway, but we both decided to look around the room. I came up to the edge of the room and saw a desk with a piece of paper lying on it. When I took a closer look, I saw that it wasn't a document, but a letter with crooked sentences hastily scribbled on it. Well, I was going to ignore it when I saw 3 words that immediately caught my attention. Flesh-biting virus. I promptly looked back when I saw something light up, accompanied by 2 gunshots coming from the other room. I saw something fall down with a loud thud. I looked back at the letter, and after speedily looking it over, noticed that it was also explaining the origin and usage of the virus. Damn, I thought Lestings told us they didn't know where the origin of the virus was. The commander started gathering everyone back, and my other squad member in the room waved me over. I pushed away my doubt and pocketed the letter as I got up. Our commander gave us brief checks before speaking. "Come on," he announced. "We're getting out of here." We all started heading down again and followed the dull red glow coming from the end of the hallway. When we reached the door, we flung it open and took in a breath of fresh air. Well, that breath was interrupted when we all heard someone making its way through some tall bushes. He finally emerged from a series of birch trees, and I could feel the dread building up in my stomach. Its head was turned to an unnatural degree, with a dark red wound around his throat. One of his arms had been snapped off and was uselessly hanging at his side. Parts of his lips were gone, and I thought one of his eyes was beginning to roll back into his head as well. Then he turned to look at our group, and he gazed at me. Well, I couldn't help feeling cold as the metal in my hands got heavier by the moment. Without a second thought, it screeched and dashed towards us. My finger was on the trigger, but I couldn't make it move. As the thing lurched at me, I heard gunfire and saw red holes appear in his uniform. his body stopped mid-move and was pushed backwards by the impact of the bullets. The anger faded from him as he fell, and he looked at me with a sad, but, in a way, thankful look in his eyes, as Geralt fell into the mud. When we finally reached the main entrance again, the sky was beginning to turn orange, with the sun not far from the horizon. Tyler's group was already there when we got to the exit. We exchanged a few words as we were getting checked for any signs of infection. We then got on our separate copters and flew back to the base. From what the commander had told me, we were going to be released tomorrow, and, for the time being, we would get our own private quarters as a means of thanking us. We were even allowed to go anywhere from the first to second floor if we were feeling hungry or thirsty, but, well, the third floor was strictly off bounds. When we arrived, we took off our gear and were taken to our designated rooms and told to contact any of the guards if need be. Once we were left alone, I chatted with Tyler and Carter, as well as some other members in my group, before I got some food and water and went back to my quarters. I placed everything on my desk and relaxed in the chair, thinking about what I would do when I was released. I heard something drop to the floor, and saw it was the letter I'd taken from the facility. Well, I picked it up and told myself the "Do Not Disturb" sign outside would do enough to at least buy me 5 or 10 minutes to look through the letter. I skipped the parts about procedures and what the virus does and began to read about where it had come from instead. Here's what it said. We're still not exactly sure where the virus originated from, but we recently revisited the wide crater we found the substance in, and we've only found more evidence to prove it came from somewhere in deep space. Like I said, I didn't want to do those experiments anymore, but they still want to pinpoint where it came from, and the bonus was irresistible. But that's the least of my worries. Matt's still convinced we can use the substance to create an antivirus capable of curing at least one type of cancer. Even after all those years, he's still at it. Nobody leads it back to him, but he's as careless as ever. You know what happens when the substance is transferred into a person's bloodstream. Well, imagine what the scale of another outbreak would be if it got out of hand. Oh, I have to go now. Matt's doing something. I promise I'll visit as soon as I can. Say hello to the others for me. Mark. By the time I'd finished reading it, I was in a state between confused and boiling. Sure, this might all be fake, but they said they'd eradicate the virus after the outbreak was suppressed, and if after all that they were still lying to us, well, I don't know exactly why I went to Professor Lesting's first, but it seemed like the only logical thing to do since he was the only one that knew anything about the virus. Most of the doors in my hallway also had the same "Do Not Disturb" sign like I did, and during my walk to Lesting's I only saw a few faces aside from the guards. When I got to Lesting's office, a couple of guards were standing next to his door and asked me what I was doing there. I told them I needed to speak to Lesting's, and one of them gave me a sort of pat check before they let me in. The professor was sitting by his desk, furrowing his brows as he intently read what looked to be another document. I coughed, and he looked up at me, giving me a smile. "Ah, you must be Brad. Come, sit. I only need one chair." He beckoned me to a seat in front of his desk. The armchair was soft, and my tension gave out as I slouched deeper into it. "So is there anything I can help you with?" "Yes, Professor. So, remember how you mentioned that you didn't know where this virus came from?" I continued, as he gave me all his attention. "Well, during our mission I found this letter that states exactly that." His face turned from serious to bewildered. "Brad, my administration was aware of no such thing. Do you still have that document? Perhaps the information is falsified." With just a little hesitation, I handed him over the letter. He gave it a rough inspection, and after a few moments, he lowered it from his face and thanked me for delivering it to him. "Oh, you better be going now. Go get some sleep. You're going to have to look sharp for them to release you." He laughed. "I'll take a good look at this." And with that, I stood up and stretched my back before turning around and walking towards the door. I heard something come from behind me.
I turned around and saw the professor holding a handgun and pointing its hole directly at my forehead.
"Later," he said with a smile.
"Professor, what are you doing?"
"Well, now, we couldn't allow you just to walk away with all this. It could compromise everything."
"What are you talking about? This all ends tomorrow. Everyone will
But no, it doesn't. You can't even begin to understand what you're dealing with, boy. This virus has the potential to wipe out all diseases on Earth. Imagine living the life of fame, becoming the most prominent billionaire in the world, and having someone like you being the last obstacle in the path. You're a fucking madman. A rich madman, to be precise," he said with a sinister chuckle. "I always insisted my walls should be soundproof."
Just before he was about to pull the trigger, something fell from his desk and bumped onto the ground. He looked to where the noise had come from, and I took that chance to charge him. Now, even though this guy is nearing his retirement age, he still had the fight and the strength to put up a challenge. I took him down and landed a punch to his nose, watching him howl in pain. He held up his arms near his face as I tried to break his defenses, but he held off long enough to shove his fist up into my gut. As we continued to exchange blows, he dodged me well enough to not lose the pistol, but I attacked him often enough for him to not have a chance to use it. I used my left wrist to block an incoming hit, but nearly fell sideways as he used the butt of his gun to swing at my skull. Before he got the chance to aim, I thrust my knuckles near his liver. He recoiled, and I expected him to fall, but he lifted up his leg and kicked my knee with all his force. Out of instinct, I grabbed his shirt and hurled him at the wall. I heard something snap as the professor defeatedly slumped to the floor. I began to approach his broken figure, when I noticed he was smiling, a sick, deteriorated smile. He lifted up his pistol, and I heard a deafening crack. Something sharp pierced my skin, and I dropped to the ground, pushing myself against the wall as my vision blurred and my ears rang.
"What the holy hell is going on here?"
I think I heard Harper exclaim as he burst through the door with the guards rushing in. The figure hurriedly came up to me and kneeled to face me. I realized it's the chief. He was talking and pleading with me, but I couldn't make out what he was saying. I saw Lestings having his weapon taken away, and him being detained by guards and medical personnel. As he was being taken away, he managed to get close enough to whisper one last thing to give me sleepless nights. I saw the chief being pulled away and doctors running up to me before everything went dark. I woke up in the hospital with a nurse standing beside me. She revealed that the bullet had hit one of my vitals, which provoked a lot of blood loss and explained why I'd blacked out so quickly. She also told me the doctors barely managed to remove the bullet and stabilize me in time. They'd have to keep me in hospital for a while. Before anyone was allowed to see me, I had some agents visit me that made me sign some federal agreements and gave me my phone back. Once they cleared out, I had Carter and some of my other family and friends visit me. They never asked me how I got shot, but it was still nice to catch up. From what I was told from Carter, when the professor was questioned, he'd made up some bullshit about how I got mad he wasn't giving up private information, and how he'd used the gun to defend himself when I attacked him. Half of the cameras in the building were suspiciously inactive during our confrontation, and with no one to back either one of us with concrete evidence, we were let off the hook, and he disappeared before anyone else could get to him. Eventually I was released, and I drove back past the nostalgic atmosphere of my neighborhood. When I got to my house, I could say I was ready to lead a normal life again, without Logan and Jack. But there was still something that made me look over my shoulder every once in a while. Something that occasionally gives me nightmares when I wake up in a cold sweat. That virus is still out there. If another outbreak happens, we might not be as lucky. We might not be able to stop it, and that will be our last mistake. Now, I know I shouldn't be telling this to everyone, but after staying silent for so long, everyone needs to know what they're up against.
All I hope is that that virus is locked away deep inside a hidden place and that it never comes back to the face of the earth. But if it does, well, then the professor's words weren't in vain. Because after all, like you said, I can't stop the inevitable. Dun, dun, dun. Another one bites the dust. Sorry, I couldn't resist. Well, yeah, as you may have realised, I'm making a concerted effort to get as many of these series that I've started and never finished out of the way, fully done and dusted. Finally managed to finish Breach at the weekend, and there's another one. Gone. Finished. What do you think of that one? 4-parter? Well, to be fair for this one, parts 3 and 4 have only just gone up on my subreddit, Dr. Creepen's Vault. So there wasn't much I could do about that one until now. Now, there are a few others that are lingering. Sometimes the authors obviously get busy with life and they don't get a chance to do all of the episodes that they want to. And sometimes it is just my fault. They're sitting there waiting for me to read them to you. So, well, another one done. And I'm going to be moving back to other series in the coming weeks. Oh, okay, well, at least this one's finished now, isn't it? Comments, thoughts, feelings, love, hate, in the comments section below the video, and I'll do my best as ever to reply to as many comments. That is enough for me for one evening. I'll be back with you again very, very soon. Till then, sweet dreams and bye-bye.